The teacup shattered against the kitchen floor, and for the first time in 15 years, I heard every crystalline note of its destruction. My daughter Sarah's mouth was still moving, her face twisted in that familiar mask of irritation I'd grown so accustomed to reading from her lips. But now I could hear the venom dripping from every word. Completely useless, Mother. Just sitting there like a piece of furniture while we're trying to plan Dad's funeral. Can't you at least pretend to care? The hearing aid clinic had warned me about the adjustment period, how overwhelming restored sound could be after so many years of silence. They hadn't warned me about this, about hearing the truth my family had been speaking behind my back, thinking I was safely locked away in my soundless world. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. I kept my face carefully blank, the same vacant expression I'd perfected over the years. Let them think I was still deaf. Let them continue revealing who they really were. She's probably relieved Dad's gone, my son Michael chimed in from the living room, his voice carrying easily to where I sat at the kitchen table. No more pretending to take care of her. We can finally put her in that home we looked at. Sarah laughed, actually laughed, as she swept up the pieces of my grandmother's china. The Sunset Manor? God, yes. I already called them. They have an opening next month. The coffee in my mouth turned bitter. Sunset Manor. I'd seen the news reports about that place, the neglect, the abuse. They thought I hadn't been paying attention, but I'd learned to read lips, to catch every news ticker, every whispered conversation when they thought I wasn't looking. My hands trembled as I reached for my notepad, the one I'd used for communication all these years. I wrote slowly, deliberately, need to use bathroom. Sarah glanced at the note and waved dismissively. Fine, whatever. Just don't take forever. The funeral director will be here soon. I shuffled toward the hallway, playing the part of the frail, confused old woman they expected me to be. But my mind was racing, sharp as it had ever been. 15 years of being treated like a burden, 15 years of watching them spend my late husband's money, 15 years of being discussed like I was already dead. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me, and I allowed myself one moment of pure rage. My reflection stared back from the mirror, 73 years old, silver hair pulled back in the same simple bun I'd worn since my hearing loss, brown eyes that everyone assumed saw nothing important anymore. But these eyes had seen everything. Every eye roll, every exasperated gesture, every time they'd brought strangers into my home to appraise my belongings while I sat right there. Every time they discussed my condition, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. The small hearing aid sat nearly invisible in my ear, a miracle of modern technology that had given me back something I'd thought was lost forever. The audiologist had been amazed at how well I'd adapted, how quickly my brain had remembered how to process sound. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for months, ever since the experimental treatment had become available. I'd told no one about the possibility of restored hearing. Not my children, not my few remaining friends, not even my doctor. I'd wanted to surprise them, to see the joy on their faces when they realized their mother could hear again. Now I knew better. Water ran from the faucet as I splashed my face, the sound still startling after so many years of silence. Through the thin bathroom wall, I could hear Sarah on the phone. Yes, I understand the deposit is non-refundable. No, she won't be a problem. She's completely deaf and pretty much out of it most of the time. What? Oh, her assets? Well, she signed power of attorney over to us years ago. My blood turned to ice. Power of attorney? I had never signed any such document. My mind raced back through the years, trying to remember what papers they'd put in front of me, what they'd told me I was signing. Insurance forms, they'd said. Medical authorizations. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the house, followed by unfamiliar voices. The funeral director, most likely, here to discuss arrangements for Harold's service. My husband of 52 years, who died 3 days ago while I held his hand in the hospital. The last person who treated me with genuine love and respect. I pressed my ear to the bathroom door, my newly restored hearing picking up every word. Mrs. Patterson is in the bathroom, Sarah was saying. She's been deaf for 15 years, so don't worry about speaking quietly. She can't hear anything. I see, came a man's voice, professional and sympathetic. And she's been living here alone since your father's passing? Oh no, Michael jumped in. She's not capable of living alone. We've been taking care of everything, her finances, her medical care, all of it. She signed everything over to us years ago. That's very responsible of you both, the funeral director replied. Many elderly people struggle with these decisions. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood. Responsible. They thought they were being responsible by stealing my life, my independence, my dignity. The conversation continued, but I'd heard enough. I flushed the toilet and ran water again, buying myself time to think. When I emerged from the bathroom, I would continue playing my part. The deaf, helpless old woman who needed to be managed and controlled. But inside, I was planning. They wanted to put me away, to take everything Harold and I had worked for our entire lives. They thought I was too old, too damaged, too inconvenient to matter anymore. They had no idea what I was capable of. I opened the bathroom door and shuffled back toward the kitchen, my face a mask of confused docility. The funeral director, a thin man in an expensive suit, was seated at my dining room table with Sarah and Michael, papers spread between them. There she is, Sarah said with false brightness. Mother, this is Mr. Hendricks. He's helping us with Dad's arrangements. I nodded vaguely and moved toward my chair, but not before I caught the look that passed between my children. Pity mixed with impatience, the expression you might give a pet that had outlived its usefulness. Mr. Hendricks smiled at me with professional kindness. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Patterson. I stared at him blankly, tilting my head as if trying to read his lips. Sarah jumped in quickly. She can't hear you. We've been handling all the communication. Of course, he nodded, then turned back to my children. Now, about the service arrangements. As they talked around me, treating me like a piece of furniture just as Sarah had said, I began to formulate my plan. It would take time, patience, and careful preparation. But I had advantages they didn't know about. I could hear every word they said. I could move more freely than they realized. And I had resources they'd forgotten about. The afternoon wore on, filled with discussions of casket prices and flower arrangements and burial plots. Through it all, I sat quietly, occasionally nodding when Sarah touched my arm or pointed to something, playing the part they expected. But when Mr. Hendricks finally left and my children began discussing dinner plans, I heard something that made my blood run cold. We should probably start going through Dad's things tonight, Michael said. Get the valuable stuff sorted before the estate sale. Good idea, Sarah agreed. And we need to get Mom's signature on those final transfer papers. The lawyer said once those are filed, everything will be official. Transfer papers. They weren't just planning to put me in a home, they were planning to take everything. The house Harold and I had bought as newlyweds, the savings we'd accumulated over 5 decades, the family heirlooms that had been passed down through generations. I excused myself again, this time heading to my bedroom. Once the door was closed, I moved with purpose that would have shocked my children. I wasn't the frail, confused woman they thought I was. Grief had aged me, yes, and the years of isolation had taken their toll. But my mind was sharp, my body stronger than they knew. From the back of my closet, I retrieved a small fireproof box I'd hidden years ago. Inside were documents they didn't know existed, copies of my real will, bank account information they'd never seen, and most importantly, a letter from my lawyer confirming that I had never signed any power of attorney documents. Whatever papers they had were forgeries. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the evidence of their betrayal, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose. They thought they could dispose of me like an unwanted burden, steal my life's work, and move on without consequences. They were about to learn how wrong they were. But first, I needed to know exactly how deep their deception went. I needed to hear more, to understand the full scope of their plans. And I needed to be very, very careful. Because if they discovered I could hear again before I was ready, if they realized I knew what they were planning. A soft knock on my bedroom door interrupted my thoughts, followed by Sarah's voice. Mom? Are you okay in there? I quickly hid the box and moved to open the door, arranging my face into its familiar mask of gentle confusion. Just tired, I said aloud, my voice carrying the slightly flat tone I developed during my years of deafness. Sarah's expression softened slightly, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her all day. I know this is hard, Mom. Losing Dad, it's been hard on all of us. For a moment, I almost believed her. Almost thought that maybe I'd misunderstood, that maybe their harsh words came from grief rather than greed. Then I heard Michael's voice from the kitchen, talking on his phone. Yeah, the old lady's completely out of it. We'll have her in the home by next month, and then we can finally sell this place. The realtor thinks we can get at least $400,000 for it. $400,000. The home Harold and I had poured our hearts into, where we'd raised our children, where we'd planned to spend our final years together. Sarah was still looking at me with that false sympathy when I made my decision. I think I'll rest now, I told her. Of course, Mom. I'll bring you some dinner later. She closed the door, and I heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway. Then, faintly, I heard her talking to Michael. She seems more confused than usual. Maybe we should move up the timeline. Good idea. I'll call the home tomorrow, see if they can take her sooner. I sat back down on my bed, my hands steady now, my mind clear. They wanted to move up their timeline? Fine. I would move up mine as well. But first, I needed to make a phone call. And I needed to do it without them hearing. I waited until I heard the television turn on in the living room, then carefully lifted the phone extension in my bedroom. My fingers remembered the number even after all these years, my lawyer's direct line, the man who'd helped Harold and me plan our estate, who'd warned us about the importance of protecting ourselves as we aged. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Davidson Law Office, this is Robert. Robert, I said quietly, this is Eleanor Patterson. I need your help. There was a pause, then surprise in his voice. Eleanor? I thought, your children told me you'd lost your hearing completely. I got it back, I said simply. And I've learned some very interesting things about what my children have been doing in my name. Another pause, longer this time. I see. Can you talk freely? For now. But Robert, I need you to listen carefully. I think my children have been forging documents. As I explained what I'd overheard, what I'd discovered, I could hear Robert's breathing change, could sense his growing concern. Eleanor, if what you're telling me is true, this is very serious. We need to meet, and we need to do it soon. Tomorrow, I said. But it has to be secret. They can't know. I understand. Can you get to my office? I thought about it. Sarah and Michael would be busy with funeral arrangements, distracted by their plans. Yes. I can manage it. Good. Come at 10 a.m. And Eleanor? Don't sign anything else. Don't let them pressure you into any more documents. I won't, I promised. As I hung up the phone, I heard footsteps in the hallway again. I quickly lay down on my bed, closing my eyes and arranging myself as if I'd been napping. The door opened softly, and I heard Sarah's voice. Mom? I brought you some soup. I opened my eyes slowly, blinking as if I'd just woken up. Thank you, dear. She set the tray on my nightstand, and for a moment, her expression was almost tender. You should eat something. You've barely had anything since Dad. Her voice trailed off, and I saw something that might have been genuine grief cross her face. It reminded me of the little girl she'd once been, the daughter who used to crawl into bed with Harold and me during thunderstorms, who'd cried when she'd accidentally stepped on a butterfly. What had happened to that little girl? When had love turned to resentment, care to calculation? Sarah, I said softly, do you remember when you were small, and you used to help me bake cookies for the church sale? She stiffened slightly, but nodded. I remember. You were so proud when Mrs. Henderson said yours were the best she'd ever tasted. Mom, that was a long time ago. Not so long, I said, watching her face carefully. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of the daughter I'd raised, the child I'd loved unconditionally. Then it was gone, replaced by the stranger who was planning to steal my life. You should rest, she said, backing toward the door. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. After she left, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if there was any way to reach the children I'd once known, if there was any chance of salvaging what was left of our family. But then I heard Michael's voice from the kitchen. Did you get her to eat something? Good. The last thing we need is her getting sick before we can get her signed into the home. And I knew that the children I'd raised were gone, replaced by strangers who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their inheritance. Tomorrow, I would begin to show them exactly what kind of obstacle I could be. But tonight, as I lay in the darkness listening to them plan my disposal, I allowed myself to grieve, not just for Harold, but for the family I'd thought I had, for the love I'd believed was real. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs, sounds I was hearing again for the first time in 15 years. This house that held 50 years of memories, where I'd brought my babies home from the hospital, where I'd nursed them through childhood illnesses, where I'd celebrated their graduations and weddings. This house they were planning to sell before my husband was even in the ground. I closed my eyes and began to plan, my mind working through possibilities and contingencies. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old woman, someone who could be easily manipulated and discarded. Tomorrow, they would begin to learn how wrong they were. But as I drifted toward sleep, one question haunted me. When they discovered what I was capable of, when they realized I'd been listening to every cruel word, every calculated plan, what lengths would they go to in order to silence me permanently? The morning sun filtered through my bedroom curtains as I heard Sarah's voice in the hallway, sharp with irritation. She's not answering. Maybe she fell or something. My bedroom door rattled as someone tried the handle. I'd locked it the night before, something I hadn't done in years, but they didn't know that. To them, I was the confused old woman who probably just forgot to unlock it. Mom. Michael's voice now, louder, more impatient. Are you okay in there? I waited a few more seconds, then shuffled to the door in my slippers, making sure they could hear my slow, uncertain footsteps. When I opened it, both my children stood there looking annoyed rather than concerned. We were worried, Sarah said, though her tone suggested otherwise. You never lock your door. I blinked at her with manufactured confusion. Did I? I don't remember. Michael exchanged a look with his sister, the kind of look that said, see how far gone she is? It's fine, Mom. We just wanted to make sure you were ready. We have a lot to do today. Ready? As if I were a child being prepared for school, rather than a woman planning to reclaim her life. I'll make breakfast, I said, starting toward the kitchen. No need, Sarah intercepted me smoothly. I already called the diner. They're delivering. You just sit and rest. Rest. Another word that had taken on sinister meaning. They wanted me resting docile, out of the way while they dismantled my existence. I settled into my usual chair at the kitchen table, watching them move around my home with a casual ownership of people who'd already decided it belonged to them. Sarah was going through the mail, sorting it into piles. Michael was on his phone, his voice carrying clearly to my newly restored ears. Yeah, the funeral's tomorrow, but we want to move fast after that. Can you have the appraisal team here by Thursday? Appraisal team. They weren't even waiting for Harold to be buried before they started liquidating our life together. The food arrived, eggs and toast I didn't want, coffee that tasted like ash in my mouth. I ate mechanically, playing my part while my mind raced through the day ahead. I had to get to Robert's office at 10, which meant I needed to create an opportunity to leave without suspicion. I think I'd like to visit Harold today, I said suddenly. Both my children looked up from their phones. Visit him? Sarah asked. At the funeral home. I want to say goodbye properly. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did want to see my husband one last time before tomorrow's service. But more importantly, the funeral home was only 3 blocks from Robert's law office. Mom, I don't think that's a good idea, Michael said. You'll just get upset. I need to see him. I let my voice crack slightly, let them see the grief I was genuinely feeling. Please. Sarah sighed. Fine. But one of us should go with you. No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. I softened it quickly. I need some time alone with him. You understand. They exchanged another look, this one tinged with impatience. They had things to do, plans to make, and I was being inconvenient. I suppose we could drop you off, Sarah said finally. But you can't stay long. We have the meeting with the insurance adjuster at 2. Insurance adjuster. Another piece of their puzzle I hadn't known about. An hour later, I stood in the viewing room at Henderson Funeral Home, looking down at Harold's peaceful face. They'd done a good job. He looked like he was simply sleeping, the way he had for 52 years beside me. I'm going to fix this, I whispered to him. I'm going to make sure they don't get away with what they're planning. The funeral director, Mr. Hendricks, appeared beside me with practiced quiet. He looks peaceful, doesn't he? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Your children seem very devoted, he continued. It's wonderful when families pull together during difficult times. If only he knew. But I simply nodded again, playing the grieving widow who couldn't hear his words of comfort. After a few more minutes, I touched Harold's hand one last time and made my way to the lobby. Sarah was waiting, checking her watch. "Ready?" she asked. "Actually," I said, "I think I'd like to walk home. The fresh air might help." "Mom, it's 6 blocks. I know the way. I've lived here for 50 years. Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but Michael appeared from the parking lot, already impatient. "Let her walk if she wants to. We have things to do." "Fine," Sarah said. "But go straight home. Don't wander off." Don't wander off. As if I were a confused child who might get lost in my own neighborhood. I watched them drive away, then immediately turned in the opposite direction. Robert's office was in the old brick building on Main Street, the same place he'd practiced law for 30 years. The same place where Harold and I had signed our real will, the one my children apparently knew nothing about. The receptionist, a young woman I didn't recognize, looked up as I entered. "Can I help you?" "I have an appointment with Robert Davidson, Eleanor Patterson." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, Mrs. Patterson. He's been expecting you. Right this way." Robert's office hadn't changed much over the years, still lined with law books, still smelling faintly of pipe tobacco though he'd quit smoking years ago. He stood as I entered, his expression grave. "Eleanor, I have to say, you look much better than I expected, given what your children told me about your condition." "What exactly did they tell you?" He gestured for me to sit, then pulled out a thick file. "They came to see me about 6 months ago. Said you were suffering from severe cognitive decline, that you'd become completely dependent on them for care. They had documents they claimed you'd signed, giving them power of attorney and guardianship." My stomach dropped. Guardianship. Full guardianship. Which would mean you'd be declared legally incompetent to make your own decisions. He opened the file and pulled out several papers. "I have to admit, Eleanor, the signatures looked authentic. But now that I'm talking to you..." "They're forgeries," I said firmly. "All of them. I never signed anything giving them control over my life." Robert studied me carefully. "You seem completely lucid to me. Alert, oriented, capable of making your own decisions. If these documents are fraudulent, we're talking about serious crimes. Elder abuse, fraud, possibly conspiracy. What can we do?" "First, we need to document your current mental state. I'm going to arrange for you to be evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist, someone who can testify that you're competent. Second, we need to secure your assets before they can transfer anything else." "What do you mean, anything else?" Robert's expression darkened. "Eleanor, according to the bank records they showed me, significant amounts have already been moved from your accounts. They claimed it was for your care, but..." The room seemed to tilt around me. "How much?" "Nearly $200,000 over the past year." $200,000. Harold's life insurance, our savings, money we'd set aside for emergencies. Money they'd stolen while pretending to care for me. "There's more," Robert continued gently. "They've also taken out a reverse mortgage on your house. If these documents are legitimate, they had the right to do so as your guardians. But if they're forgeries..." "They mortgaged my house?" My voice came out as a whisper. "I'm afraid so." "The good news is that if we can prove fraud, all of these transactions can be reversed. But we need to move quickly." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the scope of their betrayal. It wasn't just about putting me in a home, they'd been systematically stealing from me for months, maybe longer. "What do I need to do?" I asked finally. "For now, go home and act normal. Don't let them know you suspect anything. I'm going to start the legal process to freeze your accounts and challenge the guardianship." "But Eleanor..." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "If they realize you're onto them, if they discover you can hear again, they might try to have you committed. Or worse." "Worse." "People have killed for less money than what's at stake here. I'm not trying to scare you, but you need to be very careful." I left Robert's office with my mind reeling and a cell phone he'd insisted I take, a prepaid phone they wouldn't know about, programmed with his direct number. The walk home felt surreal, like moving through a nightmare where everything familiar had become threatening. When I reached my house, I could hear voices from the backyard. I slipped in through the front door and made my way quietly to the kitchen window. Sarah and Michael were standing near Harold's garden, talking to a man in a suit I didn't recognize. Their voices carried clearly through the glass. The house should appraise for at least 400,000, the stranger was saying. Maybe more, depending on the market. When are you looking to list? As soon as we get her situated, Michael replied. Probably within the month. And she's agreed to the sale? Sarah laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. She's not really in a position to agree or disagree. We have full guardianship. Excellent. I'll start preparing the paperwork. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. They weren't just planning to sell my house, they were already in the process. The man must be a realtor, already measuring my life for sale. I made it to my bedroom just as I heard them coming back inside. A few minutes later, Sarah knocked on my door. Mom? How was your visit with Dad? I opened the door, arranging my face into an expression of sad confusion. It was hard. He looked so peaceful. I'm sure he did. She studied my face. Are you feeling okay? You look a little pale. Just tired. Maybe I'll rest for a while. Good idea. Michael and I have some errands to run. We'll be back later. After they left, I sat on my bed and tried to process everything I'd learned. The scope of their betrayal was staggering. They hadn't just been planning to dispose of me, they'd been actively stealing from me for months. And tomorrow, after Harold's funeral, they would accelerate their timeline. The prepaid phone Robert had given me buzzed with a text message, psychiatric evaluation scheduled for tomorrow at 3 p.m. Address attached. This will establish your competency. Stay strong. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. That was after the funeral, which meant I'd have to find another excuse to leave the house. But first, I had to get through tonight and tomorrow morning without arousing suspicion. I was putting the phone away when I heard a car in the driveway. Too early for Sarah and Michael to be back. I looked out the window and saw a police car. My blood turned to ice. Had they somehow discovered I'd been to see Robert? Had they decided to have me committed already? The doorbell rang, and I forced myself to walk slowly to answer it, my heart hammering in my chest. 2 officers stood on my porch, a young woman and an older man. The woman spoke first. Mrs. Patterson? I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Chen. We're here about a wellness check. A wellness check? Your children called. They were concerned about your mental state, said you'd been acting confused and disoriented. They asked us to make sure you were okay. I stared at them, my mind racing. Sarah and Michael had called the police on me. This was their next move, establishing a paper trail of my supposed incompetence. I'm fine, I said carefully. Just grieving for my husband. Officer Martinez nodded sympathetically. Of course. That's completely understandable. Can we come in for just a minute? Your children mentioned you might be having some memory issues. I had no choice but to let them in. They followed me to the living room, both of them taking in the details of my home with professional eyes. Mrs. Patterson, Officer Chen said gently, can you tell me what day it is? The questions continued, basic orientation questions designed to assess my mental state. I answered them all correctly, but I could see them making notes, creating the official record my children wanted. Do you live here alone? Officer Martinez asked. My husband just passed away, I said. My children have been helping me. That's good. It's important to have family support during difficult times. She paused. They mentioned you've been having some hearing problems? Here it was, the test I'd been dreading. If I admitted I could hear, they'd wonder why my children thought I was deaf. If I pretended I couldn't, I'd be reinforcing their narrative of my decline. I lost my hearing years ago, I said finally. But I can read lips pretty well. It wasn't technically a lie, I had lost my hearing, and I could read lips. I just wasn't mentioning that I'd gotten my hearing back. The officers exchanged a look. Your children seem very concerned about you, Officer Chen said. They love you very much. If only they knew the truth. But I simply nodded, playing the role of the grateful mother whose children were looking out for her. After they left, I sat in my living room and realized how precarious my situation had become. My children were building a case against me, creating official documentation of my supposed incompetence. The police visit would be in their report, another piece of evidence that Eleanor Patterson was a confused old woman who needed to be managed. But I wasn't confused. I was angry. And tomorrow, after I buried my husband, I was going to start fighting back. The afternoon dragged by in a haze of forced normalcy. Sarah and Michael returned with groceries and flowers for tomorrow's service, moving through the house with the casual efficiency of people who already owned it. "How are you feeling about tomorrow, Mom?" Sarah asked as she arranged lilies in a vase. "Sad," I said simply. It was the truth, if not the whole truth. "It'll be a beautiful service. Dad would have loved it. Harold would have hated it, actually. He'd always said he wanted a simple burial, no fuss, no expensive flowers. But these arrangements weren't for him, they were for show, for the community to see what devoted children Sarah and Michael were." That evening, as I lay in bed listening to them discuss tomorrow's timeline, I heard something that made my blood run cold. "After the service, we'll bring her back here for a few hours," Michael was saying. "Let her rest, maybe give her one of those pills Dr. Morrison prescribed." "Good idea," Sarah agreed. "She'll be more manageable if she's a little sedated. Then we can take her to Sunset Manor in the evening, when she's too tired to make a scene." Pills. They were planning to drug me. I pulled the prepaid phone from under my pillow and texted Robert, "They're planning to sedate me tomorrow and take me to the nursing home. What do I do?" His response came quickly, "Don't take anything they give you. Make the psych appointment at 3 p.m. no matter what. If they try to force medication, call 911 and tell them you're being held against your will." I stared at the phone's screen in the darkness. Tomorrow would be the most dangerous day of my life. I had to bury my husband, evade my children's attempts to drug me, make it to my psychiatric evaluation, and somehow avoid being committed to a nursing home against my will. And I had to do it all while pretending to be the helpless old woman they thought I was. But as I lay there in the darkness, listening to them plan my disposal, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a fierce determination to survive. They thought they could steal my life, my dignity, my freedom. Tomorrow, they would learn how wrong they were. But first, I had to make it through the night without them discovering that I'd heard every word of their plan. The house settled around me with its familiar sounds, sounds I was grateful to hear again, even under these circumstances. This house that held 50 years of memories, where Harold and I had built our life together. This house they thought they'd already sold. I closed my eyes and began to plan, my mind working through every detail of tomorrow's challenges. They wanted to play games with a helpless old woman. Instead, they were about to face a very angry widow who had nothing left to lose. The morning of Harold's funeral dawned grey and drizzling, as if the sky itself was mourning. I stood at my bedroom window, watching Sarah and Michael load flowers into their car, their movements efficient and businesslike. They were dressed in appropriate black, their faces arranged in expressions of grief that looked practiced rather than genuine. "Mom." Sarah's voice called from downstairs. "We need to leave in 20 minutes. 20 minutes to prepare for what might be my last day of freedom." I'd hidden Robert's phone in my purse, along with copies of the documents from my fireproof box. If everything went according to their plan, I'd be sedated and locked away by evening. If everything went according to mine, I'd be free and they'd be facing criminal charges. The funeral service passed in a blur of condolences and hymns. I sat in the front pew between my children, playing the part of the grieving widow while my mind raced through the afternoon's challenges. People approached to offer sympathy, their voices reaching me clearly for the first time in 15 years. "She's holding up remarkably well," I heard Mrs. Henderson whisper to her daughter. "Poor thing probably doesn't even understand what's happening," came the reply. "Sarah told me she's completely gone mentally." Sarah had been spreading lies about my condition throughout the community. How many people believed I was already lost to dementia? How many would question my children's decisions about my care? After the burial, we returned to the house where neighbors had prepared a reception. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, accepting hugs and murmured condolences while watching the clock. It was already past 2, I had less than an hour to get to my psychiatric appointment. "Mom, you look exhausted," Sarah said, appearing at my elbow with a glass of water and a small white pill. "Dr. Morrison sent this for your anxiety. It'll help you rest. The sedative. Right on schedule." "I don't need anything," I said, backing away slightly. "Come on, Mom. You've been through so much today. This will just take the edge off. Michael materialized on my other side, effectively boxing me in. It's just a mild relaxant. You'll feel better. I looked around the room full of neighbors and friends, all of them watching this touching scene of devoted children caring for their fragile mother. If I made a scene here, if I accused them of trying to drug me, who would believe me? I was the deaf old woman with dementia, and they were the responsible adults managing my care. I really don't want to take anything, I said, louder this time. Mom, please. Sarah's voice carried just the right note of patient exasperation. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Mrs. Henderson approached, her face full of sympathy. Eleanor, dear, you should listen to your children. They know what's best for you. What's best for me? The phrase that had been used to justify every violation of my autonomy, every theft of my dignity. I said no. This time my voice carried clearly across the room, and several conversations stopped. Sarah's face flushed slightly, but she maintained her concerned expression. Mom, you're getting agitated. This will help calm you down. I don't want to be calmed down. I stepped back, putting distance between myself and the pill. I want to be left alone. A murmur went through the crowd. I could see the looks being exchanged. Poor Sarah and Michael, dealing with their mother's difficult behavior on top of their grief. Maybe we should take her home, Michael suggested. Let her rest in familiar surroundings. Perfect. That's exactly what I needed them to think. The crowd began to disperse, neighbors offering final condolences and promises to check on me soon. Sarah and Michael flanked me as we walked to the car, their hands on my arms in what looked like support but felt like restraint. That was embarrassing, Mom, Sarah said once we were alone. Making a scene at Dad's funeral. I didn't make a scene. I just didn't want to take a pill. You need to start trusting us, Michael added. We're only trying to help. Help. Another word that had lost all meaning. Back at the house, they settled me in my chair with a cup of tea and a sandwich I didn't want. I checked the clock, 2:45. I had 15 minutes to get to Robert's office, and they were watching me like hawks. I think I'll lie down for a while, I said, standing slowly. Good idea, Sarah agreed. You've had a long day. I made my way to my bedroom, closed the door, and immediately went to work. I changed out of my funeral dress into comfortable clothes, grabbed my purse with the hidden phone and documents, and opened my bedroom window. The window led to the small roof over our back porch, a route I'd used exactly once before 30 years ago, when I'd locked myself out of the house. Harold had been furious when he'd found me climbing down the trellis, but I'd made it safely then. I could do it again now. The climb down was harder at 73 than it had been at 43, but desperation gave me strength. I dropped into the backyard and crept along the fence line until I reached the alley behind our house. Then I ran. I hadn't run in years, but I ran now, my heart pounding with exertion and terror. Every step took me closer to freedom or deeper into danger. I wouldn't know which until I reached Robert's office. The psychiatric evaluation was conducted by Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She put me through a battery of tests: memory, reasoning, problem-solving, emotional assessment. Mrs. Patterson, she said finally, I have to tell you, your cognitive function is excellent. You're alert, oriented, and clearly capable of making your own decisions. If someone has suggested otherwise, they're either mistaken or deliberately misrepresenting your condition. What does that mean for the guardianship papers? If those documents claim you're incompetent, they're fraudulent. I'll be filing a report stating that you show no signs of cognitive impairment or dementia. You're as mentally sharp as anyone your age has a right to be. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by panic. Doctor, my children don't know I'm here. They think I'm at home, sedated. When they discover I'm gone. Dr. Warren's expression grew serious. Are you afraid of them? The question hung in the air between us. Was I afraid of my own children? A week ago, I would have said no. But a week ago, I hadn't known they were thieves and liars. I think they might try to have me committed if they realize I'm fighting back. Mrs. Patterson, based on my evaluation, no legitimate facility would accept you for involuntary commitment. You're clearly competent. However, she paused. There are less scrupulous places that might be willing to look the other way if the price is right. The prepaid phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Robert. Where are you? Your children called the police. They're saying you're missing and confused. My blood turned to ice. They'd discovered my escape and were already spinning it as evidence of my mental decline. A confused old woman wandering away from home, clearly unable to care for herself. I have to go, I told Dr. Warren. Wait. She handed me a sealed envelope. This is my official report. Keep it with you. And Mrs. Patterson? Be very careful. People have done terrible things for much less money than what's at stake here. I made it back to the alley behind my house just as police cars were pulling up in front. Through the fence, I could see Sarah talking to the officers, her face a mask of worried concern. She's been getting more confused lately, I heard her saying. We're worried she might have wandered off and gotten lost. She can't hear, so she won't respond if you call to her. I crept closer, staying hidden behind the neighbor's shed. How long has she been missing? One of the officers asked. We checked on her about an hour ago, and she wasn't in her room. The window was open, which is strange because she never opens windows. Michael appeared beside his sister. We're really worried. She's not capable of being out on her own. She could get hurt, or worse. They were painting a picture of a confused, helpless woman who'd wandered away in a state of dementia. When they found me, they'd have all the justification they needed to have me committed immediately. I needed to get back into the house without them knowing I'd ever left. But how? The answer came to me as I watched the police officers spread out to search the neighborhood. The basement. Our house had an old coal chute that led to the basement, a relic from the 1940s that Harold had never bothered to seal properly. If I could get down there, I could come up through the house and pretend I'd been in the basement the whole time. The coal chute was smaller than I remembered, and getting through it at my age was a nightmare of scrapes and bruises. But I made it, dropping into the dusty basement just as I heard footsteps on the floor above. I quickly made my way to the basement stairs, then called out in a confused voice, "Hello? Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped, then rushed toward the basement door. Sarah's voice called down, "Mom? Are you down there?" "Sarah? I was looking for. I thought I heard." I let my voice trail off, as if I couldn't quite remember what I'd been doing. She appeared at the top of the stairs, relief and irritation warring on her face. "Mom, what are you doing down there? We've been looking everywhere for you." I thought I heard a noise, like someone was in the house. I climbed the stairs slowly, playing up my confusion. Was I supposed to be somewhere? Michael appeared behind Sarah, his face flushed with anger that he was trying to hide. "Mom, you scared us to death. We thought you'd wandered off." "Wandered off? Why would I do that?" The police officers crowded into the kitchen, their expressions relieved but slightly suspicious. "She was in the basement the whole time?" one of them asked. "Apparently," Sarah said. "Mom, why didn't you answer when we called for you?" I touched my ear with a confused gesture. "I can't hear you calling. You know that." It was a perfect explanation. The deaf old woman hadn't heard them calling, had been innocently puttering around in the basement while they panicked upstairs. After the police left, Sarah and Michael sat me down at the kitchen table. Their relief had quickly turned back to determination. "Mom, this proves what we've been saying," Sarah began. "You're not safe living alone anymore. What if you'd fallen down those basement stairs? What if you'd really wandered outside and gotten lost?" "I was just looking around the house," I protested weakly. "That's exactly the problem," Michael said. "You don't remember why you went down there. You're getting confused, and it's dangerous." Sarah pulled out a folder of papers. "We've made arrangements for you to stay somewhere safe, somewhere with people who can take care of you properly. Sunset Manor." They were moving ahead with their plan, using my supposed wandering as justification. "I don't want to go anywhere," I said. "This is my home." "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be," Sarah's voice carried that familiar note of patient exasperation. "We've already packed a bag for you. Just for a few days, until we can figure out a more permanent solution." A few days. They were lying, of course. Once I was in that place, I'd never come out. What if I don't want to go? Michael's expression hardened slightly. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. We're your family, and we're making this decision because we love you. Love. The word felt like a slap. Can I at least pack my own things? We've already taken care of it, Sarah said. Everything you need is ready. They weren't even going to let me choose what to bring. I was being erased, piece by piece, decision by decision. When? I asked quietly. Tonight, Michael said. After dinner. It'll be easier to get you settled when it's quiet. Tonight. In a few hours, I'd be locked away in a place where no one would believe my protests, where my children could visit occasionally and play the part of devoted family members while they liquidated my entire life. Unless I stopped them. I think I'll rest until dinner, I said, standing slowly. Good idea, Sarah agreed. We'll call you when it's ready. Back in my bedroom, I pulled out Robert's phone and typed quickly, they're taking me to nursing home tonight. Have psych eval proving competency. What do I do? His response came immediately. I've filed emergency injunction to stop guardianship. Police should be there within the hour with court order. Stay strong. An hour. I had to keep them from taking me for one more hour. I heard them moving around the house, making final preparations. Through my window, I could see Michael loading suitcases into his car, my belongings, chosen without my input, packed without my consent. At 6 o'clock, Sarah knocked on my door. Mom? Dinner's ready. I joined them at the table, where they'd prepared my favorite meal, pot roast with vegetables, the same dinner I'd made for them countless times when they were children. It should have been a comfort, but instead it felt like a last meal. This is nice, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We wanted tonight to be special, Sarah said. A good memory before the transition. Transition. Such a gentle word for kidnapping. We ate in relative silence, the weight of unspoken truths heavy between us. They thought they were managing a confused old woman's final evening at home. I was counting down the minutes until my rescue arrived. At 7 o'clock, Michael stood up. We should probably get going soon. They're expecting us at 8. Let me just get my coat, I said, standing slowly. Already in the car, Sarah said quickly. Everything's ready. Of course it was. They'd thought of everything, planned for every contingency except the one that was about to unfold. The doorbell rang. We all froze. Sarah and Michael exchanged a look. They weren't expecting anyone. I'll get it, Michael said, but I was already moving toward the door. 2 police officers stood on my porch, but these weren't the same ones from earlier. These officers carried official papers and wore expressions of professional authority. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson? The first officer asked. Yes. I'm Officer Rodriguez. This is Officer Kim. We have a court order regarding your guardianship status. Sarah appeared beside me, her face pale. What's this about? Officer Rodriguez handed her the papers. Ma'am, there's been a legal challenge to the guardianship documents filed for Mrs. Patterson. Until this matter is resolved, she cannot be moved from her residence or have any major decisions made on her behalf. I watched Sarah's face as she read the court order, watched the color drain from her cheeks as she realized what was happening. This is ridiculous, Michael said, pushing past us to read over his sister's shoulder. Our mother is incompetent. We have legal guardianship. Sir, that's exactly what's being challenged, Officer Kim said. Mrs. Patterson has been evaluated by a court-appointed psychiatrist who found her to be fully competent. If the guardianship documents are fraudulent, that's a serious crime. The word fraudulent hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Sarah's hands were shaking as she held the papers. There must be some mistake. We would never. Ma'am, I suggest you contact your attorney, Officer Rodriguez said. Mrs. Patterson, you're free to remain in your home. No one can force you to leave or make decisions for you until this matter is resolved in court. After the officers left, we stood in the hallway in stunned silence. The carefully orchestrated plan had just collapsed around my children's feet. How? Sarah whispered finally. How did you? She stopped, her eyes widening as understanding dawned. You can hear, she said. It wasn't a question. I looked at my children, really looked at them, for the first time in years. I saw the greed in their eyes, the calculation, the complete absence of love or remorse. Yes, I said simply. I can hear. How long? Michael's voice was barely controlled. Long enough. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of exposed lies and shattered pretenses. You heard everything, Sarah said. Every word. Every plan. Every cruel comment about the burden I'd become. Michael's face was flushed with anger now, all pretense of concern abandoned. You manipulative old. Careful, I interrupted. Those officers are still outside. Sarah sank into a chair, her face in her hands. Mom, you don't understand. We were trying to help. Help. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. You stole $200,000 from me. You forged guardianship papers. You took out a reverse mortgage on my house. You were planning to drug me and lock me away so you could steal everything Harold and I worked for our entire lives. We needed the money. Michael exploded, his careful facade finally cracking completely. Do you have any idea how expensive it's been, taking care of you all these years? Taking care of me? I stared at him in disbelief. You mean the 10 minutes a week you spent here? The grocery runs you complained about constantly? The bills you paid with my own money? Sarah looked up from her hands, tears streaming down her face, but I could see the anger beneath the grief. You don't understand the pressure we've been under. Michael lost his job, I'm going through a divorce. So you decided to steal from your mother. It's not stealing. Michael shouted. It's our inheritance anyway. We were just accessing it early. Your inheritance. I let the words hang in the air. Harold and I worked for 50 years to build what we had. We saved every penny, sacrificed vacations and luxuries so we could leave something for our children. And you couldn't even wait for me to die before you started spending it. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't just been planning to put me away, they'd been hoping I would die. Quickly, quietly, conveniently. How long have you been stealing from me? I asked quietly. Sarah wiped her eyes, but didn't answer. How long? I repeated, my voice harder now. Since Dad got sick, Michael said finally. His medical bills were enormous, and you weren't thinking clearly about the finances. I was thinking perfectly clearly. I chose to spend whatever it took to keep him comfortable. You were going to bankrupt yourself. Sarah protested. We had to step in, had to make the hard decisions you couldn't make. You mean you had to forge my signature on documents giving you control of my money? The silence that followed was deafening. We can fix this, Sarah said suddenly, desperately. We can pay it back, all of it. We can tear up the nursing home papers, pretend none of this happened. With what money? I asked. You've already spent most of it. And what about the reverse mortgage? What about the lies you've been telling the community about my mental state? What about the fact that you called the police on me today, tried to have me declared a missing person with dementia? Michael's face was red with fury now. You think you're so smart, don't you? Playing the helpless old lady while you plotted against us. I wasn't plotting against you. I was trying to survive you. We're your children. Sarah screamed, her composure finally shattering completely. We're your family. How could you do this to us? The question was so absurd, so completely backwards, that I almost laughed. How could I do this to you? Sarah, you were planning to drug me tonight. You were going to lock me in a nursing home and tell everyone I was too demented to know what was happening. You've stolen my money, mortgaged my house, and spent months convincing the entire community that I'm mentally incompetent. And you're asking how I could do this to you? We never meant for it to go this far, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Yes, you did. You planned every detail. The forged documents, the fake medical reports, the police visits to establish my supposed confusion. You've been building a case against me for months, maybe years. Michael stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. You have no idea what you've done. We can't pay back that money. Sarah's going to lose her house. I'm already behind on my mortgage. That's not my problem. It is your problem, he shouted. We're your children. You're supposed to take care of us. I did take care of you. I raised you, loved you, sacrificed for you. I gave you everything I had to give. But I don't owe you my life savings, and I certainly don't owe you my freedom. Sarah stood up suddenly, Her face twisted with an emotion I'd never seen before, pure hatred. "You selfish old bitch. Do you know what this is going to do to us? Do you care at all?" The words hit me like a slap, but I kept my voice steady. "I care about what you were going to do to me. I care about the fact that my own children were willing to destroy my life for money." "It's not about the money," Michael said, but even he didn't sound convinced. "Then what is it about?" Neither of them answered. The front door opened, and Robert Davidson walked in, followed by the two police officers from earlier. "Mrs. Patterson," Robert said, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to discuss the next steps." Sarah and Michael looked between Robert and the officers, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. "Are we under arrest?" Sarah asked quietly. "Not yet," Officer Rodriguez said, "but we'll need you both to come to the station for questioning. The district attorney will decide whether to file charges." "What kind of charges?" Michael's voice was barely a whisper. Robert consulted his notes. "Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, theft, conspiracy. Possibly attempted kidnapping, depending on how the DA interprets tonight's events." Sarah sank back into her chair, her face gray. "This will ruin us." "You ruined yourselves," I said quietly. As the officers led my children away, Sarah turned back to me one last time. "Mom, please. We can work this out. We're family." Family. The word that had been used to justify every betrayal, every theft, every violation of my trust and dignity. "No," I said. "Family doesn't do what you did to me. Family doesn't steal from each other, lie to each other, or try to destroy each other's lives for money." "So that's it?" Michael called from the doorway. "You're just going to let them arrest us? Your own children?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and tried to find some trace of the little boy I'd once rocked to sleep, the child I'd bandaged when he fell off his bike, the young man I'd been so proud of at his graduation. He was gone. They both were. The children I'd raised and loved had been replaced by strangers who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their inheritance. "You made your choices," I said finally. "Now you have to live with the consequences." After they were gone, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the silence I'd lived with for 15 years and had only recently escaped. But this silence was different. It was peaceful rather than isolating, chosen rather than imposed. Robert sat down across from me, his expression gentle but serious. "Eleanor, I need you to understand what comes next. This is going to be a long, difficult process. There will be court hearings, media attention, family members taking sides. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Harold, about the life we'd built together, about the values we tried to instill in our children. I thought about the community that had watched me struggle with my hearing loss, that had seen my children's apparent devotion, that would now learn the truth about what had been happening behind closed doors. "I'm prepared," I said. "There's something else," Robert continued. "The reverse mortgage, the stolen money, we can recover most of it, but it will take time. In the meantime, you'll need to be careful about your finances." "I understand." "And Eleanor, there may be other family members who side with Sarah and Michael. People who think you're being too harsh, that family should forgive family no matter what." I'd already thought about that. Harold's sister, my own cousins, the grandchildren who barely knew me but might be influenced by their parents' version of events. "Let them think what they want," I said. "I know the truth." Robert nodded and gathered his papers. "I'll be in touch tomorrow about the next steps. Try to get some rest." After he left, I walked through my house, not theirs, and tried to process everything that had happened. In the space of a few days, I'd gone from being a helpless victim to taking control of my own life. I'd exposed my children's crimes, saved my home, and reclaimed my independence. But the victory felt hollow. I'd won, but at the cost of losing my family forever. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed Harold and I had shared for so many years and allowed myself to grieve, not just for him, but for the children I'd thought I had, for the family I'd believed was real. The house settled around me with its familiar sounds, but now they were sounds of solitude rather than companionship. I was free, but I was also alone in a way I'd never been before. My phone buzzed with a text message, not from Robert's prepaid phone, but from my regular phone. A number I didn't recognize. "Grandma Eleanor? This is Jenny, Michael's daughter. I just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Can I come see you? Jenny. Michael's youngest, the granddaughter who'd always been different from the rest, who'd visited me regularly even after my hearing loss, who'd learned sign language just to communicate with me. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, yes. I'd like that very much. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. Maybe there were still people in my family who understood the difference between love and greed, between caring and controlling. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked older than I had a week ago, worn down by grief and betrayal. But there was something else in my reflection, a strength I'd forgotten I possessed, a dignity that no one could steal from me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Court hearings, legal proceedings, the difficult process of rebuilding a life that had been systematically dismantled. There would be people who judged me for turning in my own children, who thought I should have forgiven them for the sake of family unity. But tonight, for the first time in years, I was sleeping in my own bed, in my own house, as a free woman who answered to no one but herself. I'd given my children the surprise of their lives, all right. Just not the one I'd originally planned. I'd planned to surprise them with the joy of my recovered hearing, to see their faces light up with happiness when they realized their mother could hear their voices again. Instead, I'd surprised them with the consequences of their own cruelty. As I turned off the lights and settled into bed, I could hear the rain beginning to fall outside, a gentle, cleansing sound that seemed to wash away the last traces of the life I'd been forced to live and herald the beginning of the life I was choosing to reclaim. I was 73 years old, recently widowed, and facing a legal battle that would likely consume months of my remaining time on Earth. But I was free. And sometimes, freedom is the greatest surprise of all. The rain continued through the night, and I slept peacefully for the first time in years, knowing that when I woke up, I would still be in my own home, making my own decisions, living my own life. My children had tried to steal everything from me, my money, my home, my independence, my dignity. But they'd failed to steal the most important thing of all, my will to fight back. And in the end, that had made all the difference.